Good morning. This is the Successful Funding Show. I'm Carl Dakin. I refer to myself as the Capital Coach because all of my work is aimed at helping small businesses and communities raise funding. And that's what we talk about during this show is funding, whether it's for a charity, a small business, a community, or some other type of a project. And we have the ability in this live stream show for the audience to participate. And we encourage you to do that because this show isn't for me and it isn't for my guest, it's for you, the audience. And so if you have a question or a comment, feel free to chip in at any time during the show, and we'll see what we can do to get to your question or comment. So this morning, I have with me an associate member of my LinkedIn cohort and a fellow consultant, Kon. And I am not even going to attempt to pronounce his last name.
Oh, come
I've
on,
tried to,
Carl.
yeah, I have tried to learn to spell it, and I'm failing still. So I'm going to cheat and just say, "Hey, Con." So good morning. Con is an expert on the topic of leadership, particularly with regard to getting the workforce, the team, to work together to achieve ultimate productivity. He's a recently published author. He's going to become so famous, I'll never be able to get him back on the show again. But nonetheless, he is here to help us talk about leadership in the context of funding. And we're going to find out where this conversation leads us. So, Con, good morning.
Good morning, my friend. It is so good to be with you.
So, tell us a little bit, give the audience a background on who is Khan, how did Khan get to where he is today,
Mm,
and what's most important on Khan's table.
interesting. Okay, so let me start with the most recent part. I am the founder and CEO of Fresh Biz Solutions. And in terms of relatability to your show, it is a human capital consulting firm. So, from what does that mean? The best way that I explain it to people is that most organizations that I support, and they're typically 50 to $500 million organizations, um, they all have these amazing business plans. They've spent a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of brain power putting these brilliant strategic plans together. Unfortunately, they're not worth the paper they're written on if they don't have the people to execute them. And that's where I come in. That's where I help them. So my role is to make sure that they have enough of the talent that they need, the leadership talent specifically, ready, willing, and able on the right seat on the bus going in the right direction. And that's where I come in. And sometimes what that looks like is perhaps training and development through a leadership development workshop. Sometimes that looks like one on one or group coaching for executives or emerging leaders. Sometimes it's a speaking event or facilitating a strategic planning event or team building event, something to bring the group together and focus them in the right direction. And ultimately, it's also about aligning their people systems to make sure that every dollar that they spend on their resources, on their people, is a dollar well spent and it's aligned for a purpose. So that's where I come in and help and really maximize what the investment, if you will, that senior leaders make in their people, because they, they all have plans, they all have dreams, they all want to see that they're going to spend the money anyway. The money that they spend on their people is probably one of their largest line items on their P&L. Uh, but there's a right way and a wrong way to spend that money. And where I come in is to help them really focus their efforts, make sure that they're investing in the right way to get that return on investment that they're looking for.
So, what caused you to focus on people and management teams and productivity?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I believe it was Mark Twain that said that the two most important days in your life are the day you come into this world and the day you realize why. And for me, I've always known that I've had this desire, this strong pull towards being a coach, towards being a teacher. And from that perspective, I've always gravitated that, whether it was my early days as being the older sibling of a family, whether it was at school at different events and sporting pieces, whether it was in the military as an instructor, as and even in my professional career, I've always gravitated towards roles in leadership, especially that allow me to influence behavior, to understand, to coach, to teach, to get the most out of my team. Some people are amazing players, some people are amazing coaches. They're not always the same person. And so to me, I've always gravitated towards the role of being a coach and being the one that helps my people get to their maximum potential. So that's kind of how I've ended up into that role and always wanted to be there.
So in that context then of helping your team be all it can be,
Mhm.
um, and I speak as a coach in my own right. We were mentioning a little bit of this before the show started, that on some days you're pushing, some days you're pulling, some days you're pulling your hair.
Yeah.
Uh, but it it's a manner of trying to get a person to realize and execute on their own ability within whatever situation they're in. And how do you get this maximum performance? What is it that causes someone to step up to a higher level?
There's so much to unpack in that question, my friend, and you ask great questions. So thank you for that. Let me kind of pull from my latest book, the best-selling book, the Engagement Blueprint. Um, there is a quote that I want to paraphrase from Zig Ziglar, the famous Zig Ziglar. He used to talk about motivation, and I'll change that to the word engagement because to me it's just as powerful. Uh, that engagement is like bathing. You can't do it just once. You have to do it over and over again. So you have to engage your people. But engagement is a very intrinsic feeling. So you cannot do it to somebody else. It has to come from within them. And just like a good coach, you realize very, very quickly that you can't make somebody want to do that. You can lead that horse to water, you can't make it drink. But what you can do as a smart coach is make it thirsty enough that it wants to drink. So you need to create the kind of environment that people will feel self-motivated, self-engaged for their own benefit. They have to discover that. Now, I think we've talked about it. I coach executives, but the name Coach Kon that I have often used comes from my kids, my soccer kids. I coach young student athletes, and I have for well over a decade. And there is a formula to creating champions. And a big part of that is really understanding that coaching model that you can bring to the table and understanding the power of discovery. A good coach doesn't necessarily teach somebody what they don't already know. They help them discover it for themselves. And that's the power of that. But just as I tell my kids, I tell my executives, I can't want it for you. If you don't come ready and motivated and willing to learn, to discover, to explore, to challenge yourself, I can't do that for you. And that's because it's artificial. It's like anything else. It won't, the minute I step back from that, it's gone. So I can't be the one pushing you in that direction. You have to want it. So you have to come with that. The rest we can figure out together. But the desire, that burning desire to be the best, that burning desire to succeed, you have to bring that to the table. That's your why.
So this is I will say, a common challenge for me in that I'll see an inspirational speaker. Somebody will stand up and tell me that I should be more than I am. And I listen to it and it kind of just goes over me like it never slowed down. At the end of the day, you're going, did they actually achieve anything, or did they just do a cheerleading, thing with pom poms at the
Mhm.
front of the room? So to me, I think there's a distinction between talking about inspiration and inciting inspiration. So
Right.
how do you get to the inciting part where the person is, stepping up?
Yeah. So, so again, there are certain things that I look for because I deal with leaders typically on the move. They're either moving up into a new position, they're moving to a new look company, they're doing a lot of different things. So in my coachings, I'm typically working with leaders on the move. Um, and that involves transformation, internal, external, whatever the situation might be. And when you're talking about transformational change, for it to be successful, there are certain characteristics that need to be present, certain things, certain factors that we look for. And if it's not there, you see the gaps. It manifests in certain behaviors. So, to give you, without getting into too much detail and sharing too much of my secret sauce here, Carl, uh, it's it starts with the why, right? So people have to have a purpose. There needs to be a business case for an individual or an organization to change. So you have to have the why. Why am I doing this? Okay. So if they're coming to you, what are they hoping to accomplish? Are they looking to scale? Are they looking to start a business? Are they looking to start a nonprofit? What is it that's the why? And why is that important to them? So we start with that. And then you continue with the vision. If I'm here and I want to move from this burning platform, where am I going? I'm not going to jump unless I know where I'm jumping to. And so I want to see what that future holds. So to me, that vision that we have to cast forward is we have to really define that. Now, when I'm working with an individual, that means looking at it and saying, okay, where do you want to be in this time that we're working together or beyond that? What does that look like? What does that smell like, taste like, feel like? The closer they can get to that, imagining that, their brain won't distinguish the dream from the reality. They'll have accomplished that in their mind. And then it's just a matter of connecting the dots, which is the next step. It's the plan. Because if you don't have a plan, it's just a daydream. So we go from point A to point B, we have our plan. Then we talk about the additional motivators and incentives. How do you reward the right behaviors as you start moving towards that? Then, keeping on the same path, we talk about, do we have the right tools in place? Do I have the skills that I need to make that transition? What is it that I need to do? And we continue to develop that toolkit of theirs so they're able to understand and discover what they have that's transferable. What else do they need to pick up from here? So now they're equipped to make that change, because otherwise we start getting anxious. Can I succeed at this next level, at this next place? We prepare them for that. And then ultimately, what we want to get to is that situation where truly, truly, they're able to put all of the pieces together to get to that point.
I like the way you describe that because I think transformation and change is what's taking place. You're acknowledging that you're not where you want to be, or maybe where you'd like to be, and you want to get to another place. And if you're going on a trip, yeah, you can get in your car and you can drive in any direction, but it doesn't matter if you don't have a goal in mind, you don't have
Right.
a place that you want to go to. And I think that's part of the thing that I find frustrating about inspirational speakers is they just assume that as soon as you make up your mind, it's already happened.
Yeah.
And I hear you saying, okay, we have to visualize where we're going to go. Then we have to do an assessment of, do we have car and gas in the tank to drive the car in that direction? Do we have a map? Do we have GPS? Can we read all the signs along the roadway? All these different things which may or may not be present. So the transformation may be a building process in addition to a change in position, so that you're looking to go to yet another location. And this is something I encounter a lot with small businesses looking to raise funding, in that commonly the ones who come to me have already started their business. They've already brought in friends and family funding, and now they go, now we're going to scale up. We're going to grow. We're going to become all we can be.
Mhm.
And there is a slow, or if not painful, realization they don't have all the tools necessary to scale up and grow. They may have managed 2 people. They haven't managed 20. They certainly haven't managed 200.
Mhm.
Making one of a kind every day is an artisanal effort. Making 2,000 a day is a little bit more automated, more manufacturing oriented. And so at that point, I sometimes find people who can't make the change. This is out of their wheelhouse. They're not capable, and we have to bring in a new management team for stage two or chapter two in the story of that particular business.
Mhm.
How do you deal with it when somebody comes to a realization that change may not be their best choice?
Well, and that's most people, especially solopreneurs and small business owners. We are conditioned because of the American dream to think that more is better. More is always better. And more sometimes is just more, as our friend Don says. And it's important to understand that just like you have a lower spec limit of what is the minimum that I have to generate revenue wise or operationally in order to be successful, whatever the case might be, we need to look at that as an upper spec limit because what you're describing is the transformation of the giant leaps that a company has to make. Going from one to multiple people is a big leap for a company. Going from 10 to 100 is a leap. Revenue wise, when you're making big changes, when you're making big leaps, these are huge things that you need to take into account because your present infrastructure does not support that much load. So you have to change all of those things. It's not just as simple as saying, well, I make this much money making 10 widgets. If I make 100 widgets, it's 10 times that. It's not that simple because in order to produce 100 widgets, you need to change your entire infrastructure. And you certainly can't do it alone. So these are the illusions that a lot of people that haven't been there have. That's why they come to you, they come to me, because as good guides, as good navigators, we've been there. And it's hard to lead somebody where you've never been. So they look to us that have done this over and over again to be able to guide them through that process. And so that's the part where the value of a Carl Dakin comes in and saying, okay, not only can I help you fund this, but I'm going to help you guide you through this process because it's not just handing you a bunch of money. It's what do you do with that money? That money, you can burn through that money very, very quickly. God knows how many startups have out there that have been well funded that got nowhere. And that's the piece that we need to understand. That's why it's so important for a business to succeed. How we utilize our resources, human resources, financial resources, physical resources is so important. We have to be very wise in how we use those things.
Yeah, so the challenge I commonly face in funding is the first thing that they need to scale up is the number of relationships that they have in order to gain enough funding to buy all the fun toys and buildings and so forth that goes along with it. The They decided they needed to go from 10 to 1,000 units a day, and they can do a spreadsheet that talks about, well, I'm going to need two more of these. I'm going to need more warehouse space. I'm going to need this, that, and the other. And then when they get ready for funding, they'll come to me and they go, I don't know who to talk to. And that's the good news. We'll have a blank slate to work with. But the problem is that for them to get funding, they need to have relationships with those people who share their vision, who want them to succeed. And quite commonly, they don't have the ability to create those relationships or to identify which of those relationships might actually have a checkbook that will write them a check. And we find that and of all this transformation that you're describing, this is yet another skill set, another set of knowledge and experience that's not present. And so the challenge for me is to help them figure out how to tell their story to the right people so that they get the reaction they're looking for. But along that path, they can't just stand up in front of a room, which is how social media and press and all the pitch competitions go. Just show up, just stand up. Somebody will throw you a check, and you're going like, I think the relationship needs to be a little deeper than a simple pitch.
Right.
And so we go through what I call a backlash or disappointment. They're going, well, I made the pitch and I didn't get funding, and I'm like,
Congratulations.
okay.
That's a lesson.
That's a lesson, but let's make sure you understand the totality of this lesson.
Right.
You didn't get rejected. You had no one to reject you. You don't have a relationship where somebody can toss you out the door or, you know, quit the relationship.
Mm.
You haven't even got to the starting point yet.
Yep.
So this is where I see a lot of the work in funding is trying to get them to understand just who it is that they need to talk to, who might actually share their vision and go through that. But I think the larger problem is that they don't understand how to start a relationship or add 1,000 relationships.
Mm.
And when we get into crowdfunding, investment crowdfunding, now where you're going to small dollar investments in large quantities, maybe they need 1,000 or 10,000 relationships.
Right.
How do you do that? This is part of the deal that they have to get better at. And if they can't, then they're pretty much stuck with whatever resources they currently have.
Yeah, I mean, to me, when I work with clients, I mean, one of the things that's become very obvious to me is that business development is relationship development. Whether it's finding new customers, finding investors, however the case might be, no matter what the technology says, at some point you're building relationships with people. Whether it's through your brand, through your personal contacts, whatever the case might be, your idea, your mission, whatever it is, you're building a following. You're building a relationship with people. And you people a community, even to some extent. I mean, I saw my business skyrocket, to be honest with you, Carl, when, in the past I was just limiting myself to the idea that I'm just developing leaders, okay, or developing cultures or developing certain things until I put all of the pieces together, through writing a few books, through talking enough, through communicating with people, of being there during the transformation periods. And I realized that what I've started is a movement. It's a movement that is intended to transform workplaces, to make them more human, to transform these workplaces for the benefit of both the employers and the employees, and making sure that we can make a healthy workplace well-being, if you will, a competitive advantage, not just because it benefits you financially as a business owner to have a healthy workplace, but because it's the right thing to do for everybody involved. I mean, anybody that's been part of a high performing team, knows the difference when they're not on a high performing team. And the feeling that we get, the gut check, if you will, to me is, how does that gut feel on Sunday when you're thinking about going to work on Monday? Is it tight or are you excited? Do you have butterflies in there or cramps? And that's the difference in what kind of environment you're operating in. And just the same for you. When you're looking at an environment, half the time you have to untangle the mess that's been created in there before you can fund it. I mean, you're not going to throw good money at bad. And so, from that perspective, part of your job, not just is to coach them how to raise the money or even use the money to some extent, it's untangling some of that mess. And that's where the value of having an expert and a guide like you comes in. Because again, you've been there, you've seen that, you've done that, and you have the t-shirt to prove it.
I appreciate you making the distinction about worrying about going to work on Monday. Some of us don't, who work 7 days a week, it doesn't really matter which day it is. Uh, but yeah, it's interesting because, like, I have one project right now where I'm not sure anyone can make a decision. It seems to be an elusive thought process to get to a decision. And on another project I'm working on, everybody grabs the ball and runs with it whenever they get the chance. And
Mm,
we now have developed kind of an internal communication that when anyone steps up and takes care of something without being asked or tasked to do so, somebody will send out an email, goes teamwork, and uh, I was setting up a show for this week, and a guy says, "I'll get you the contact information." And I was looking at my clock because I was trying to figure out, do we have enough time to promote the show correctly? And I took one of the things he gave me, tracked down the speaker, got his bio, got the whole thing out. And, and I get this email comes across the next morning, teamwork. And,
Yeah.
It really is a lot of fun when as you describe it, you're working with a professional team, a top team that's hitting on all cylinders, everything's working together. And You don't have to worry too much about filling the gaps because everybody's looking out for the gaps and everybody's trying to make sure everything's working. And as a consequence, things just happen. They move fast. They get things done, and you have this continuing sense of accomplishment. You know that when you hit a problem, it's only a matter of time before that problem's in the rearview mirror and you can move on.
Right.
Whereas one of the challenges of a small business is they typically have an incomplete team, not casting aspersions on anyone, but it takes a combination of skills to do whatever that business requires. And if you only have one of the skills, then you're asking somebody to do something they're not qualified for or don't want to do, and they're missing team members. And so a lot of times in the early stages, it's getting by with less than an adequate team, but sometimes I don't think they focus enough on rounding out the team, getting the team completely filled out. And as we move into funding, one of the things that I try to point out to small businesses, whoever I'm working with, that who you know is the first step towards getting funding.
Mm.
And if you're one person, if you're that solo entrepreneur, you're limited by your existing network, which got you to where you are, but may not get you to where you want to go. If you had a board of directors with 3 to 5 people on it, they each have their networks. If you add a board of advisors around that, which I've recommended up to 20 people on a board of advisors, now we have 20 people plus the board of directors and their network. And then to the term of community that you used earlier, which I talked about with Don Cohen yesterday on his show, I consider my true team is my community, which includes all of my suppliers, vendors, service providers, distributors, and so forth. Because if we're not all in sync, then my company is running out of organization with everybody else. So I want all those people included. And if they all know where we're going as far as raising funding, then we have a whole bunch of contacts into the world to reach out and talk to start those new relationships and do it in a way where we're coming from either an existing relationship or a very warm introduction.
Yeah. And then they can shoot you the email that says teamwork.
Yes, it really is. It's kind of internal award recognition, like a badging system.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see who ends up with the most badges by the time we get done.
Yeah.
But it is a pleasure to work in a high performing team,
Yeah.
and it's something that I think every entrepreneur, once they've been there once, will never want to go back. Uh,
Yeah, and more than anything else, Carl, I mean, you talked about the speed and the ability to solve problems, right? How quickly and how effectively they solve problems. And that builds resilience, but that resilience comes from a sense of confidence, which comes from a sense of trust. And so at the end of the day, a big part of what you and I are trying to help with is that peace of mind, that trust that things can and will get done. That's essentially what we're doing. I mean, when I work with CEOs, with the C-suite, with senior leaders, business owners, yes, on paper we're looking at the numbers, but at the heart of it, emotionally, what is it truly that they're telling me that they struggle with? Well, at the heart of it is a fear in their mind of not having the right people in place to do their job. They don't know if they can go to battle with the troops they have. They just don't know. And some of them are not tested. Some of them are not have proven in the past that they're kind of wishy-washy. They don't know. Are these people going to stay with me during the hard times, or are they bailing on me? Are they going to balk at the attempt to get to the next level, or are they going to be excited about it? They don't know. And so, to me, dealing and addressing that fear that they have is how I can help them. Because what I do, the opposite of the fear that I try to get them to, is trust. And that trust is going to build the confidence, and the confidence is going to build that resilience that they can handle those things. So that's what I'm trying to do. They want to know that, you know what, if I'm putting myself out there, putting my hard-earned money, or my resources or my time towards all of these people, it should be a two-way street. That commitment should be a two-way street. I mean, we have this constant battle, push-pull between employers and employees, and that's been going on forever. And there's always a power struggle. But the most successful organizations, those high-performing teams, both sides are in sync. They're not trying to outdo each other. It's not a win-lose. They're looking for the win-win opportunities. And that's why I talk about a movement that benefits both the employers and the employees. Because when we can get to that place, it feels like my company. And I say that with pride, even though I'm just an employee, so to speak, on paper. But I feel it like my company because I have an ownership emotionally and otherwise. And that's the differentiator. You can pay people to do a job, but you can't pay them to care. You can't pay them to be excellent. That comes from their discretion, and they will give that discretionary effort where they have a belief in the sense that they belong. And so they have to drive through certain needs that need to get addressed. And that's what I write about in the book, to be honest with you, Carl. I mean, the business reasons behind engaging your employees are very obvious. I'll give you an example. Last year, disengagement, people not giving a damn, okay, cost globally $8.9 trillion in lost productivity. 8.9 trillion. That's almost 9% of global GDP. Now think about that. I mean, for a small business owner that's trying to make payroll or trying to figure out how they're going to get funding to operate, they're losing money. They're bleeding money because for every disengaged employee that they have on their payroll, every one of them, for every $10,000 that they're getting paid, they're pissing away $3,400. They're costing the business 34% of their salary. That's money. That's money in the bank right there. You want to make sure that you are using your funds appropriately, engage your people. And that starts with making sure that you hire hard to make sure you're bringing the right people on board, that you're training them smart, and that managing becomes easy. Why? Because they're engaged, they're self-driven from that perspective. But their needs have to be met. And that's something that leaders can do. There's four drivers. Tap into those four drivers, and trust me, your people will be engaged.
I think it's a part of the employer-employee divide is that there's a failure to recognize the employees as an asset. I mean, I often tell my clients that their employees, their staff, their team is their single most valuable asset. It's something that they get the most out of, they get the greatest yield, and as you put it, that when they're engaged, their productivity goes up.
Yeah,
It's a natural relationship on that. But too often, the tone of the company becomes extractive, which is you're here to do my bidding, you're here to give up your life, you're here to work weekends if I tell you to, and I don't care about your kid's soccer game or your personal life.
yeah,
And they treat that as though that's unimportant. And that directly impacts their willingness to give their all for the company. At the same time, I've seen some take advantage of that where they're going like, well, they'll dangle the carrot. Well, if you'll just put in another 100 hours this week, we'll get you maybe a bonus sometime in the future, somehow, some way. And I believe in incentives. I recommend profit sharing programs, both team and individual bonus programs, kind of like a professional sports player. If that receiver, gets 1,000 yards this year, then where's the bonus? Well, they get one because it's typically in their contract. But if I'm working on a line production and we get out one extra car this month, Is there recognition? Is there a reward? Or is it, well, it's about time, which is the worst possible attitude to convey. And I just think that too often we don't treat that relationship with the employee as an asset. We don't ask ourselves every morning, what can I do to get a better yield out of that asset? Would more training help? Would pairing them with somebody else on the team help?
Mm.
Do they need a break? Can we change their work schedule around to accommodate the fact that their kids playing soccer this fall? All these different things which really don't cost that much, if they cost anything at all. And as you present it, we have this huge productivity improvement that basically the company's rewarded with if they get to that level of productivity.
Yeah, studies have shown. I mean, I looked at some of the recent things that I included in the book and my research, Carl, and in the studies, time after time, companies that have a high engagement level from their people, from yielding, I mean, revenue wise, they're almost 20% better than their competitors. They generate about three times the profitability of that. And almost 90%, 87% of people that work for engaged companies say they're not looking for anything else. They're not going anywhere. They want to stay where they are. So the cost of replacing those people, you save. So you look at some of those things. If you're creating a transactional environment, you're going to get transactional responses from people. That's how toxic workplaces are created, because people get desensitized. People don't give a damn, and they start being disengaged. Because the worst thing that could happen is not that they leave, it's that they stay and they poison your environment. And that's the part where it becomes a cancerous place. And so if you made it so they feel like they can't go anywhere and you think that you're going to control them, they're just going to sit there and fester. And that's not a good thing for anybody, because they're going to ruin the good people that you have. The talented people that you have on your payroll, they have options. I hate to break it to you. They can go down the street, and they always will. The top performers will always find a place to land. And so what you're left with is the mediocrity. So how are you going to handle that? Don't just give lip service and say, my people are my greatest asset. That's BS. Treat it like an asset. Treat it like the treasure that it is. And to me, again, you pointed it out. It doesn't have to cost money. I'll give you the four drivers that I have in my book right now. The first one is the need that people have to feel valued. They want to feel that they're appreciated. Treat them like an asset. A thank you goes a long way, because people that are appreciated will always do more than what's expected. And so when you can show people that you're grateful for their contribution, you acknowledge their contribution from that piece, you create a safe environment physically, mentally, emotionally, where they can thrive and take ownership of things, where they're not afraid to speak up. Now, all of a sudden, you have an entire army of quality control people, of customer service people, of salespeople. Why? Because every person in your organization becomes that for you when they feel safe enough to speak up and care enough. When you show respect to them as a person and you don't treat them like a slave, that's a very different thing. When you don't treat them like an object, when you recognize that they have a family, they have a life, and you respect them as a human being, that's the starting point. But there's two kinds of respect. There's that owed respect that we just talked about. And then there's the earned respect. When somebody does well and they produce that extra line, that extra car that month on the line, recognize that behavior and know exactly what you're recognizing. Be specific about it so you can get more. As Ken Blanchard calls it, catch people doing the right thing. And then ultimately, give people your time. Be present. Don't just stop by and say, well, I guess it's your performance review today. You got 5 minutes. Let's get this over and done with before HR gets on my case. Yeah, that really tells people you care. You've really spent a lot of time on this. When you're there, shut off devices. Be present with the person and give them your time. So that's one thing. The first driver is help people feel valued. If you want people to be engaged, help them feel valued. The second one And you mentioned it on and off in your commentary. Help them feel connected. Help them feel connected to you as their leader, to each other as teammates, to the goals that you share. Help them connect their personal aspirations to what the company and the team is trying to accomplish. Because if I can feel that I can accomplish my goals by helping the team, hey, all the better for it. I'm going to push twice as hard. So connecting the dots, if you want people to feel engaged, help them feel connected that they belong on your team. Then the third piece is that people want to feel like they're contributing, they're making a difference. So not only do they want to fit into their group, but they also want to show that they're making a special contribution, that earned respect that we talked about. If I'm going to go spend 8 hours of my day at a job or more, I don't want to just be sitting there and thinking that it's futile. I want to know that I'm making a difference. You look at it and you see the volunteers that are out there, Carl. Volunteers end up working harder than they would, and they're not getting paid. Why? Because they believe in what they're doing. They feel like they're making a difference. So if I can show, one of the things that I did, even with my entry-level employees, I want them to understand the difference that they can make through their work. Connect the dots for them. So even the most menial tasks that they're making, show them what a difference that can make for the team and the organization beyond that. Show them on the P&L line where they're making a contribution. If they don't understand that, they're not going to be effective. So if you want people to feel engaged, show them how to be productive. And then finally, we all have a need to learn and grow. I tell my customers, and I tell in my speaking engagements from the big stages, I said, water is a life source. But the difference between a swamp and a river is movement, it's flow. Everybody, everybody wants to show movement in their life. They don't want to be stagnant. They want to continue to learn and grow in some capacity. Even if it's not from a promotion standpoint, they want to expand what they're doing because let's face it, who wants to keep going to the same thing over and over again year after year? We all have a need to show something, to grow somehow. Maybe it's becoming a mentor as opposed to becoming a star performer. Whatever the case might be, find smart ways to develop your people, to show them that everything that they're doing is a learning opportunity for them or for somebody else, and show them how they can continue to learn and grow. So if you want people to be engaged, support them so they can learn and grow within your business. That way they won't be going elsewhere to look for things.
Yeah, so Con, we finally got a comment in the audience from Don Cohen.
Ah,
Well, I'm going to pull this on the screen. Why don't you reach behind yourself and grab your new book and wave it in front of the camera so um, we can see it. And this is one of the funs of AV is Con, can you reverse your screen so that reads from left to right
let's
instead of
see
right to
how we
left?
do that.
If you go into your
Settings.
settings, I think
There
you
we
can
go.
do.
Video. Oh, mirror camera. Got it. There we go.
Here we are. And now when you hold the book up, I can read it. It's in English, not in Greek. So this is Khan's new book, The Engagement Blueprint. I got a copy on Kindle. I'm sure that the small royalty that Kindle paid to Khan is not going to make him rich.
I
Uh,
appreciate it, my friend.
but Don Cohen's with us this morning. Don is a mentor to both Cotton and myself in learning how to use LinkedIn Live and LinkedIn to build our brand and to share information, what we know with audiences on a one-on-many kind of approach. And I've been working with Don just a little over a year now, and it has been very helpful to me. I'm very appreciative to Don for all of his advice. And I appear regularly on his show from time to time to talk about funding and funding tips and other topics relative to the show today. Don, thanks for being here. And then we have a comment from Ken Bytel. This is a phenomenal material, Con and Carl. I just realized both of our names start with a K, so we'll have to play off that a little bit. Um, and this is from Ken. So I won't go to KKK because now we're into the wrong thinking process. But Ken, thanks for shouting out about that. Um, and This is what we invite the audience to do. If you have a question, you can ask me, where I may or may not know anything, but Con knows everything about leadership. So we're going to, because as you just seen, he's got a book, and you can buy that from multiple sources, including the inexpensive version on Kindle, such as I did. And we'll go from there. We have yet another comment from Zach Dane. Thanks for having us. Kind of recently saw a news piece talking about people not retiring, so less chances to promote the younger generations. How do you promote that demographic that doesn't have a shot at the moment to keep moving up? And Zane is a young entrepreneur, so he's probably talking about himself, but I'll give Zane a hard time about that later. So how do you respond to on here? He's got it as Zach. Okay, Zach. It's Zachary Ding. That's my mistake. So how do you respond to that question, Con?
Um, so there's a couple of things to unpack. First of all, it's answering the question of why people can't retire. What's going on? Why we have the delays here and everything else. I liken that to the microcosm of what happened post-COVID with college athletes, where they redshirted them an extra year because nothing was moving during that time. So it created a backlog of new talent wanting to come up. But the thing to remember is, like I said before, growth can happen in a lot of different ways. You can turn this seeming roadblock into a positive thing. Why? Because when that generation retires, and we call that the silver tsunami, where a lot of people were leaving early in a lot of industries. So you see the situation, and you can take advantage of that, because when that generation retires, there's an enormous amount of institutional and professional knowledge that will retire with them. If we can use mentoring and reverse mentoring to be able to pair up young up and coming talent with experienced people that are still around, there's a huge opportunity for us to be able to prepare our young talent even more, give them more challenging opportunities, pair them up, use that opportunity to have those mentors there while still capitalizing on the experience that a lot of these more mature leaders have in place. I looked at it even with my own, again, I may bring it to the microcosm of coaching on Saturdays with the kids' soccer, Carl. I look at it, and I've complained to my club. I said, where's the young coaches that you want to bring along? Because I could do more. I could spend more time out here. I could even coach longer if I have a young assistant that I can mentor that could be out there bending constantly, picking up all the cones that I can't do that anymore. So physically, they can do things that I can't, and run around with the kids and demonstrate and do certain things while I coach them and mentor them. There is a unique opportunity. What we perceive as a roadblock could actually be a huge opportunity for us to mentor, or even reverse mentor, have the young people mentor the older workers as far as some of the technology, some of the skills that they know, and how to do things efficiently. And now you're really capitalizing on your workforce. If the relationship is there, trust me, you reward the right behaviors, you'll be able to still take advantage of that.
It's interesting because I think it's one of the flaws in what I call the entrepreneurship world,
Mhm.
is that if you're working in a more standardized business or industry, you typically will have an apprenticeship program. You go through a training program. There will be milestones for you
Mhm.
to step into
Right.
and become a master of your craft. And yet, in entrepreneurship, too often, the person's first experience as an entrepreneur is a wholesale disaster because they got over their head totally and just got wrecked because of what they didn't know. There is a silver tsunami right now. I've seen the numbers that in boomers retiring over the next few years, there's like 250,000 businesses where there are no successors in place to take over these businesses.
Right.
And it would be really great, as you described it, to create an intentional training program for young entrepreneurs who are paired with older entrepreneurs and giving them a chance to see and talk without necessarily being under the great pressure to perform that they would be under if they were the CEO of that particular operation.
Correct.
And these businesses need successors. It's part of the challenge that everybody's talking about. All these small businesses are going to go out of existence because, for whatever reason, no one has stepped forward to take it over. The family isn't there. There's a lot of other reasons. I know when I was growing up, my family business, ordinarily you would take over the family business in your 30s.
Right.
But as we got older and we expanded our careers, I might not have taken over the family business till I was in my 50s, which
Right.
wasn't very appealing to me. Reason why I didn't hang in there for the long term. But I think it would be great to create not just a mentoring program, but an apprenticeship program for entrepreneurs where they could come in and they could be active in a business. They could, as you say, bring their youth, bring their knowledge of technology, maybe even be able to explain what a Gen Z or a millennial is thinking in their head to some of us boomers. And I think that would be an interesting match that would be good for everyone.
Yeah.
Um, we've got a comment here from Harvey Tuck, and I want to throw it up. Harvey is another member of our group. He's one of the rock stars. I think he's even listed on LinkedIn as a rock star. I haven't been able to find where they hid that information on his profile. But Harvey says he's a rock star, and I believe him because he does such cool stuff in franchising. He has his own 2 LinkedIn live shows, and he's looking to do more all the time.
Yeah.
So if I'm always trying to figure out what's the next cool thing I can do to make my stuff better, I'll look at Harvey as one of my examples to do that. So Harvey says, "Hey, Carl and Con, great to be here with my friends. Sorry I'm late. I wanted to say hello. If I recall correctly, Harvey's got a show later this morning in a couple hours. And so if anybody wants to learn more about franchising and from some of the greats in the franchising industry, tune in to Harvey's show on LinkedIn. And there's lots to learn there. I enjoy listening in as often as I can because franchising is one particular way of going to market with a business. It's a way of raising funding by having your franchisees raise the funding instead of having to do it internally. And it's a strategy a number of businesses should consider when they're out thinking about where's the next funding dollar going to come from. So Harvey, thanks for stepping in this morning. So Con, as we're wrapping up, working towards the end of this engagement this morning, I see that in funding these relationships, there's parallels here where I want a funder to join my team. I want them to be all they can be. I want to communicate this to the funder that if they join my team by providing funding to the business, that I can help them aspire to do more, be more than they're doing currently. So I'm trying to translate some of the stuff that you've been saying into the funding world. But I think this is one of the shortfalls of raising funding is too often the entrepreneur, the small business, they reach out to a person with money, they treat it like a transaction. There is no true relationship, and they totally forget what are you doing for the investor? What are you going to do to make their investment the best it can be? how do you integrate that thinking, their help, and going beyond the money to all the people they know, their skill, their experience, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and that's part of building the relationships to truly understand the nuances and everything else. I mean, you can look at a spreadsheet, and in some ways, you can say, okay, is this a wise investment or not? But that should be the starting point. It should not be the end all be all. It's the starting place where you say, okay, do I want to dig deeper into this one? Um, it should not be the only thing that you do, because you cannot. There is the story, or the numbers, and then there's a story behind the numbers. Just like with everything else, Carl, there is normally that space beyond that you don't know all the differences, you don't know all the nuances. And too many times we live in a quick hit society right now. Everybody wants quick answers, and they all want the hook, the headline, and nobody wants to read the article anymore. And so people don't have the patience to go into that. Being proactive with that is important. I'll go back to the previous comment before we pulled up Harvey's piece, when you asked me about the entrepreneurial, you know, program, being able to have an apprenticeship for something like that. Well, I've got 3 clients that I've been working with over the last few years that they're in different stages of replacing their senior leadership, because they're being proactive about that, and they're identifying successors. We're developing those successors, and not just these successors, but the entire leadership team, to be able to prepare for this transition. These things don't happen by accident. And granted, many of these companies are large, but this is same thing applies to small businesses. Like you and me, I mean, we all we're supposed to be successors to our fathers or to our parents or to our mothers about taking over a business. Well, to some extent, you got to plan for these things. I grew up, I cut my teeth in this space working for a company that grew to be 100,000 employees spread over 100 countries, publicly traded, Fortune 100. If you didn't have a succession plan in place, you were going to tank in the market, because nobody was going to be willing to invest in you, because they didn't feel that you were a sound investment without having a clear succession plan. And I've brought that level of discipline and awareness to a lot of the smaller organizations or medium sized companies that I work with. Even if they're not publicly traded, they still have a responsibility from a business continuity standpoint to make sure that the business is safe. If that president, if that senior leader tomorrow wins the lottery, I'm sorry, but as much as you think they like you, they may be off jet setting somewhere to go dip their toes in the water and order a drink with an umbrella on it. And where's that leave you? That's the part that you have to be prepared for, because this is part of your important foundation to be successful. You can't hope to run a business without the right people in place. That's the bottom line.
Harvey has made one more comment here that I just feel I need to share. And Harvey says if he's a rock star, it's only because he's surrounded by rock stars like me and Con. So, um,
Oh,
I,
he's piling it on thick now.
yeah, I'm feeling this inner glow take over me right now as I feel this praise coming down. So this is a
I
really
thought it
good
was
way
our
to.
foreheads with the light, but okay, we'll take the glow.
This is a really good way to wind up today's show, knowing that we've met Harvey's highest praise that he can hand out. So thank you, Harvey, for that. And
Wow.
thank you to the audience. So as we wrap up today, Con, how would you kind of summarize your thoughts for today on how leadership and getting highest productivity out of people translates into success for an entrepreneur, success in raising funding?
So I'm going to tap into another proverb. It's an African proverb, and it basically says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so you're going to need a strong team around you to go far. Um, and if you want that team to be a high performing team, engage them. Engage, win their hearts, win their minds, show them that you value them, Show them how they connect their future, how they can hitch their wagon to the team's wagon. Show them how they can be productive and excel and become excellent in what they're doing. And then show them how they can grow and have a career with you and share that future with you. So from that perspective, you are investing in them. You are making them feel engaged. And in turn, when they are engaged, they will give you their commitment and the highest performance that they can.
Yeah, so thank you for those thoughts. Thank you to the audience for today. Um, and this is what we try to do here on this show every Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock Mountain Time, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. I like to try to find people who are authors, experts, leaders in their own fields who can contribute their thinking to what we're trying to do here, which is to help everyone who's trying to raise funding see it from a different perspective, get a little bit insight on how to do it better. And I think we've accomplished that for today. So I'm gonna take Harvey's praise and keep thinking about it throughout the morning. So thank you, Kon, for being on the show today. Thank you to our audience, and we'll see you all next Tuesday. Take care.